So when I think about helping parents with breastfeeding, a couple of my families come to mind, and I think they might be familiar to you. So here's a mother who says, "Why won't you look at me? You must not love me or love my breast milk." Here's another mother who says, "My baby wiggles and squirms off and on all night long. Let's add some cereal to my breast milk. Maybe she'll get a better night's sleep." Or this daddy who says, "She cries now more this week than she did last week. It must be time to add formula." So, what is interesting about these families is that all three of these families are describing normal infant behavior, but they are misinterpreting, they are misunderstanding normal behavior and interpreting it as a breastfeeding or a parenting problem. So, what is it that today's parents want and need from us? And I think we're all aware that we're blessed to have a variety of families we're serving. So, of course, the first thing families want is they want us to be multicultural and inclusive in the images we use, the trainings we prepare. They also want the information to be evidence based. Though these families spend a lot of time on the internet, they do not have the background necessarily to be able to tell what is accurate information from what is erroneous or disinformation. So they count on us, the professionals, to provide evidence based information. They also know that we all learn differently. So they expect the training we provide to be. To address those varied learning styles. Some people learn visually and really need video to look at. Other people's learn with their hearing and do fine with a lecture, or I may surprise you at the end of the class by showing you a lullaby that actually can teach about breastfeeding. Or people learn by hands on, so they want interactive, kind of at least interactive internet materials that can help them kind of practice the materials and ideas that they're learning about. But most importantly, I believe families want the information we present to feel very personal. They want to feel like what you are talking about to me is because you know that that will be important to me and my baby. They don't want to feel like we're giving them routine information that we could just give any old body who was passing by. So, today, what we're going to think about is the idea and the amazing literature on responsive parenting and what this has to do with successful breastfeeding and breastfeeding teaching. We're going to talk about how a baby's changing development impacts the breastfeeding experience. It's just no longer good enough to teach mothers to initiate breastfeeding, to be an expert at helping that mother on day 1 to about day 12 or 14. We really need information to give them over the course of those babies' months and year as their breastfeeding experiences also changes. And then also, we're going to be thinking about the literature on child development, pediatric, and lactation literature. So let's start with the most amazing child development literature on the subject that's called responsive parenting. And what this literature talks about is really the kind of neurodevelopment of a baby's brain. And all of us know now that that first 1,000 days of a baby's life is so critically important. It is the time in which a baby's brain is developing most, as it will do at any other time in that baby's life, as all those massive neuron connections happen inside that baby's brain. And I love this image that was shared with me some time ago, thinking about taking a walk in the woods. And so here we have the woods on the left, and we look up into the sky, and we see tree trunks and branches and leaves and just a massive amount of forestry over our head. But if we look straight ahead, we don't see a path. We don't know where we're going. Whereas that image on the right, again, we're in a dense forest. But if we look ahead, we see a path. We have a sense of how we can get from here to there. Now, what's interesting and what the child development literature shows us is that every interaction between a parent and a child, a caregiver and a child, every interaction creates a connection in the brain, not just a massive growth of the brain, but connectedness that are vital for both the emotional, intellectual, and social development. And I remember teaching this information to in my class, Understanding Your Newborn. And I had a daddy say to me, well, I had thought that that first few weeks was, just all about feeding the baby, about breastfeeding and what was I going to have to do, right? But now I understand that changing my baby's diaper helps my baby's brain grow. Isn't that an exciting idea for that young daddy to understand that every time he looks at that baby, pats the baby's head, sings to the baby, that he is growing the competency of his little baby? So, the World Health Organization helps us understand this, I think, in a particularly helpful way. They tell us that there are 3 steps to responsive parenting. First, a parent has to notice the behavior. Then they have to understand the behavior and interpret it accurately. And then they have to take action based on that understanding. So let's think about those 3 parents we saw a minute ago. That one mother saw her baby having that kind of restless sleep. And so she noticed that behavior, but she misinterpreted it as a problem. But we understand that that was actually evidence of a active sleep cycle in a baby. Or how about that daddy with a 2 week old? He noticed also that his baby was crying more, but he misinterpreted that as a parenting problem and a need to add formula instead of understanding that his baby was exactly at the age where we expect there to be a little ticking up in the amount of crying in a healthy full term baby. So, again, the idea is that we need to help parents be able to notice their baby's behavior, see their baby's behavior, but then they need to understand that behavior so that they can take actions that are built on the sense of those positive interactions with their baby instead of fearful and worried interactions that occur when families misunderstand their baby's behavior. So maybe some of you have seen this most lovely YouTube. This is a daddy sitting there having a conversation with his 18-month-old. And you as you listen and watch this baby, you would swear this baby was talking a foreign language that this daddy understood. But this baby is not speaking English. But you can see that there is real communication going back and forth between this daddy and this baby. And this is the kind of profoundly important communication that happens when we nurture and reinforce that responsive parenting in those tiny little newborns that we serve. So here's a daddy watching America's Got Talent with his little baby.
Did you understand it though? No. No. Okay. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think that. Yeah. That's what I said. He was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? Don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. 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 Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh?
So truly, I've watched that video dozens and dozens of times, and I laugh every time at just the amazing way in which that daddy asks the baby a question and he answers, and then the baby asks the daddy a question, and who knows what they're talking about, but clearly communication is happening. And so, what we know to be the case is that when there is responsive parenting, when parents can notice, understand, and then take action on that understanding, that there is lower postpartum depression, there's increased confidence in both the mother and the father, there's increased breastfeeding duration, there's decreased family stress, and as the new literature shows us, there's decreased obesity in children who are not being overfed in a situation where parents are misunderstanding that baby's communication. And then what's so amazing about the world of breastfeeding is that you have to actually practice responsive parenting to successfully breastfeed. You have to learn how to read that baby's cues of mom, I'm hungry, and also read the cues of mom, I'm satisfied, so that responsive parenting is necessary for effective breastfeeding. But what the literature shows is that breastfeeding teaches responsive parenting. So actually, when we look at families who practice breastfeeding, they have more evidence of responsive parenting than families who are not breastfeeding their children. So that's what the child development literature has to share with us. So let's jump into the pediatric literature and one of my favorite people in the world, Dr. T. Brazelton, with whom I had the great honor to study his work and study with him upon a number of occasions. He passed away at age 100 a couple of years ago. And his body of work, oops, I hear somebody's uh, got their microphone on. Maybe you could turn it off so we can make sure we can all hear. Thank you. Appreciate that. Um, so Dr. Brazelton has these two big bodies of work that very much relate to the issue of breastfeeding. So the first one is, let's see, Sita, I think your microphone's on, honey.
I'm so sorry I didn't see
No
that.
worries, no worries. Thank you, dear. Um, so these two bodies of work very closely connect to our efforts with breastfeeding, the neonatal behavioral assessment scale and his touch points theory. So the NBAS is a very complicated way of looking at an infant's behavior. It's a scale that's used around the world mostly as a research scale to answer excuse me, really important questions like, what is the impact of neonatal jaundice on a baby's behavior? What is the impact of nicotine exposure in utero? What is the impact of um, small for gestational age on a baby's behavior? So this kind of information can be only understood if you look very closely at a baby's behavior. So this exam looks at 28 behaviors and 18 different reflexes. And each time you're looking at one little baby, you're evaluating all those items on a 1 to 9 scale. So I got certified in this exam many years ago, and it was really the hardest academic thing I ever did. And I never used it as a research model because I always intended to use it as a way of increasing a parent's understanding of their baby's behavior. So here's just two little examples of the range of normal. So look, here's two babies. They are both normal, healthy babies, but look how different they are. Here's a baby with what we might think of as kind of moderate activity. She moves and wiggles a little bit, then her body gets nice and still, and she kind of just lays there for a few minutes and then maybe moves slowly. But look at her buddy over here, wiggle, squirm, wiggle, squirm. The parents say every time they set the baby down, this is what she does. Now, see, both of these are normal behaviors, but you could imagine that the mother with this squirmy baby might say something like, do you think my baby has that ADH thing, that hyperactivity thing I've been hearing about? So for us to be able to know the range of a normal baby's behavior and be able to reassure parents can be very important. And of course, we know the more confident a mother is, the more likely she is to meet her breastfeeding goals. Now, here's another example, a really fun example, where we look at a baby's ability to look at a toy. This first baby was born 2 weeks early, and we see that he just can barely look at the toy. He looks a second, and then his eyes drift away. His arms almost seem flaccid beside him. He can barely get it, look at that toy. Now, here's another baby coming up, and she's quite different. This baby moves all the time, moves so much that she is distracted by her own movement. And the mother says, I can never get her to look at my face. And so, one thing we do in a situation like this is swaddle this baby a second. And look what happens when she swaddled. She is so attentive. She immediately is able to look at that toy, which is so comforting for this mother. This mother who was starting to have some postpartum depression for fear that her baby didn't like to look at her. Oh, see how very, very smart your baby is, I say to this mother. Now here's another baby, 2 weeks old. This baby is so alert and engaged. Her arms are relaxed beside her, but you get the feeling they're relaxed because she's so intent on what she's paying attention to right now. And so, having sort of the ability to have a parent see the competency of their baby is one way that we reinforce how well a baby is doing and the competency of the parents. So, when we think about what we want to teach parents from a behavioral point of view, I want to be thinking about use language that is familiar to families and help them understand a baby's sleep wake cycles, what's normal for a baby, and also what we call a physiologic stress response. How does the baby act when they are overstressed by their environment? Now, during your training, you might have come to think about the newborn states, 6 states, and I always found it really hard to remember 6 states. And actually, I had a mother say to me one time, I said, "Oh, your baby's in the drowsy state," and she looked at me and said, "I thought we were in the state of North Carolina." So that word state, although it's the word used in the medical literature, doesn't really connect to a family's understanding because, as we know, the words we use matter. The words we use either say, I'm a professional trying to teach you something, or the words say, I'm a professional who invites you to learn together with me about your baby. So, what I like to do is instead of calling newborn states, I say, what zone is your baby in? Your baby's in the resting zone, the ready zone, or the rebooting zone. So I teach a class called Understanding Your Newborn, and I hope that some of you would consider teaching this class. I have these PowerPoint and slides all available to teach this class. And what we do is we help parents understand how babies transition between wakefulness, fussiness, and ready to eat and ready to play zones throughout their day. And so imagine that you had taught that to a family and they came to see you and they were in there for their 2 week old weight check in the WIC office. And you looked at that baby and the mother said, well, it's getting about time for my baby to eat. And you look down at the baby and the baby is kind of in the resting zone. And you're thinking, the baby seems a little too sleepy to be put to the breast right now. So I could imagine you asking the mother, well, tell me, when you see your baby in this kind of resting zone, what have you discovered that can help bring her up to that ready zone so she's ready to eat? And the mother says, well, I learned that from you about those zones. And I see that if it's about time for her to eat, if I pick her up and just sway her gently like this a minute, sometimes her eyes will pop wide open and I can put her right on the breast. That's an amazing ability to notice her baby's behavior. Now, the next thing we want families to think about is a baby's stress response. This baby, born a couple of weeks early, is showing us a stress response with that jerkiness and overshooting he just demonstrated. And babies that will demonstrate those kinds of behavior and that are at risk for these stress response are babies with neurological problems, a baby born early, or a baby who's had to have billy lights. And so, once again, we could say your baby's showing a stress response, but I had another mother say to me one day, don't tell me my baby is stressed out already. So I said, that's not language that really works for this mother. And so instead of calling it a stress response, I call it your baby is sending out an SOS. SOS stands for sign of overstimulation. And so, this fella on the deserted island who is sending out an SOS, all he's saying is, help me, help me. And that's what our babies are saying when they're a little bit overstimulated. So I spent about 10 years of my life developing a video that we use to help parents understand a baby's normal behavior and how to identify when their baby is sending out an SOS and what to do about it. So this is a fun little video. It's a portion of the video I'd like to share with you. It's about 5 minutes.
The second parent skill is recognizing when your baby sends out an SOS. SOS stands for sign of overstimulation. All newborns are at times overstimulated as they adjust to being out in the world. Babies born early SOS more often. The first way babies send out an SOS is with changes in their body skin color, movement, and breathing. This baby, who was born a few weeks early, shows these body SOSs. See how his face turns a bit red in color? His muscles jerk and shake, and his breathing gets faster. The second way babies send out an SOS is with changes in their behavior, spacing out, switching off, and shutting down. This baby demonstrates the first behavioral SOS, spacing out. Watch as Jan plays with the baby by shaking a rattle. The baby begins to look like she is staring into space. Spacing out is a sign of overstimulation. This baby demonstrates the second behavioral SOS, switching off, described in the medical literature as gaze aversion. The harder the mother tries to get the baby's attention, the more the baby looks the other way. This switching off is a sign that the baby is trying to manage the amount of stimulation she takes in. Mothers are relieved to learn what this behavior means, and that it is not a sign that the baby is rejecting her. This baby demonstrates the third behavioral SOS, shutting down. Again, we see Jan playing with the baby. Though the baby is momentarily engaged with this play, she soon begins to get drowsy and shuts down as a response to too much stimulation. When you notice your baby having an SOS, you wonder how to help. You can respond to an SOS by decreasing stimulation and increasing support of your baby. Decrease stimulation by speaking quietly to the overstimulated baby. Increase support by holding your baby's hands against his chest or gently swaying him. Putting your baby skin to skin or breastfeeding him will also decrease that SOS.
So when we give families language that they can understand, so everybody can remember the idea of the baby sending out an SOS. When we give them language, we're actually helping to increase their observation of their baby. And then by increasing their observation, we're increasing their sense of their competence as a new parent. And then we know that that is directly connected to breastfeeding success. So I'd like to share a sweet mama I met in my practice. She was a mother who was really at high risk for not breastfeeding. She was a teenager living in a family where people had not breastfed before, and then she delivered a premature baby. But she had come to our class on understanding your newborn and preparing for breastfeeding and childbirth. And look at the sophisticated understanding she had of her newborn. I thought it was really special the way that Carson communicated to us as a tiny little baby. And I wondered if you would share a little bit about how you learned to read his body language and what that meant to you.
Yes, when we were talking, you were showing me some of the little signs, like him squinting his eyes, and him like moving his arms wildly and his legs. That means that he's been overstimulated. So we tried different things, like putting his arms close to his chest and swaddling him and rocking him back and forth, and that seemed to help. And you can tell the difference between when he's being overstimulated versus when he's just closing his eyes and being calm.
Yeah, and I remember, I love that when we talked about this, you said you were going to teach your sister and your mom, and so y'all all were
Yes.
paying so much attention to these little ways that babies communicate. That's
Yes.
great. Yeah.
Babies are very smart, smarter than what we think they are.
And isn't that what we want all of our families to think, that babies are very smart, smarter than what we think they are? That mother went on to become a mentor when she went off to community college, a mentor of new mothers. So you never know how far your teaching goes. So the video we just saw a little clip of, it talks about helping your parents prevent and solve problems around their babies eating, sleeping, crying, and attachment. And we won't have time to watch the whole video today. Now, the second body of information that's going to be really important to you, though, is understanding Dr. Brazelton's touch points theory. It is an easy to understand and a profoundly important idea that we should be sharing in child development, about child development with our breastfeeding families. And here's the simple idea, is that right when a baby is having a surge in her development, right when a baby is about to do something new and exciting, like this little girl, she's a good at sitting down, and she's on the verge to crawling. And right when she's on the verge to this new activity, there is this disorganization that goes on in her eating, her sleeping, and her general behavior. Now, we know all this is true for us as grown-ups. Before I presented a couple of weeks ago to the National WIC conference, for about 2 days before that, I was a little bit anxious. I didn't sleep as well at night. I couldn't eat very well the day before my presentation. This is how humans are when we're surging into something new. We get to be a little disorganized in our behavior. But see, a baby who had been, for instance, maybe only waking up once at night and now wakes up 3 times at night because she's on the surge of this development, what's the first thing the mother's going to think? She's going to think, the baby's not got enough to eat. I should add some cereal before I breastfeed her at night. So it's very common, we believe, that mothers misinterpret this normal, expected change in behavior. And I say expected because we know when these developmental surges are going to occur. Now, the lactation literature. Well, I'm particularly fond of the Infant Feeding and Practice Study 2, which was printed way back in 2008, but is still today being reanalyzed and looked at again. And what they did was they had 1,500 families that were breastfeeding families, and they called these mothers up every month and said, "Are you still breastfeeding? If not, why did you stop breastfeeding?" And what they found was that, of course, over the course of a baby's year, the mothers would stop breastfeeding for different reasons. They may stop at 2 weeks if they've got cracked and bleeding nipples and don't know how to get help. They may stop at 4 months if their baby has a nursing strike and they don't know what to do. They may stop breastfeeding at 9 months when the baby suddenly is going through separation anxiety and starts waking up 4 times at night. But what was interesting about each of these reports about mothers stopping breastfeeding is that all of the mothers said, "I stopped breastfeeding because my baby was not satisfied." So, see, what they were seeing was they were seeing normal behavior in a baby from birth to 1 year, but they were misinterpreting that behavior as the baby was not satisfied with breastfeeding, whereas it really was that the baby was having a surge and a change in her development. So for me, these two big bodies of information, Dr. Brazelton's touch points and this infant feeding and practice study research, led me to develop this idea, the roadmap to breastfeeding success, where we look at a baby's development from the prenatal period up to 1 year of life. And when is it that the babies are going to have this surge in development, this changing in development, which is going to impact the breastfeeding experience? And what basic information do we need to be sharing with families along this journey? So, of course, during the prenatal and birth period, we want to be thinking about helping a mother think about why is breastfeeding important and why is it important to her? Where will she get support, both professionally and socially, when that baby gets born? And can she read her baby's body language? And that is why I'm very excited about our prenatal patients being able to watch that video, because of course, they got their wits about them a little bit more prenatally than right after the baby comes, to give them the confidence already that they can learn to read their baby's body language. At the birth time, we have so much to teach them about the World Health Organization recommendations. We want these families to recognize a baby's early feeding cues, bringing that hand up to the mouth, smacking her lips, this little baby wiggling and squirming. And of course, I love this idea of showing this as a video rather than just talking about it. And of course, we want this family also to know how you count those poops to know that the baby is getting an adequate nutrition. Because as I say when I teach my class, poops do not lie. Poops tell us how many calories a baby is getting. So then, if we press on up to the 2 week period, the most important thing we want this daddy to know that we met earlier in our program was that normal, healthy babies increase their crying a little bit more when they're about 2 weeks old. And this appears to be the case with babies all around the world. It peaks at about 6 weeks and then increasingly gets better over 12 weeks. And so, what the research shows is that we actually first need to let families know this is normal. This is not a problem with your milk production. And then we have to give families very specific skills. This is how you calm a fussy baby, using your voice to calm the baby, bringing the hands to the chest, swaying that baby up and down, wearing the baby, putting the baby on the breast, and swaddling the baby a few minutes if their jerkiness and trembling is just so distracting them. So, the 2 week period, we need them to understand about normal infant crying. At 1 month, we want them to understand that babies have two distinct sleep cycles. And those two cycles are what we think of as active light sleep and then still deep sleep. Of course, we all know that still deep sleep where you lift the arm up and it flops down and you say, "Oh, I wish I could sleep like a baby." But parents need to know that during that squirmy sleep, that the brain is developing, that babies spend more time in that squirmy active sleep than in still deep sleep. So I did want to show you just a 3 minute from the video about identifying deep and active sleep.
This baby shows us what still deep sleep looks like. Her body is still. She surprises her mother by not responding to any stimulation. There is no movement of her eyes and her eyelids stay shut. Her breathing is deep and regular and she makes no sounds. Every hour or so, a newborn will transition from this still deep sleep to active light sleep. This baby is in active light sleep. Her eyes might flash open. She puckers her mouth, makes sucking movements, vocalizes, and can even smile. But this baby is not waking up. She is just transitioning from her still deep sleep to her active light sleep. In only a few minutes, we observe that she transitions back to still deep sleep. Her parents are delighted to learn that important brain development occurs during the active light sleep cycle.
I would wake up every time he made a whimper at night thinking he needed to breastfeed. I just was exhausted. I didn't get any more than an hour of sleep at a time, and that was a maximum. He seemed frustrated. I seemed frustrated. We're both crying in the middle of the night. When I met with you and you started talking about the active sleep and the deep sleep,
it made a lot of sense. Could you describe what it looked like to you to see him having what you think now was active sleep?
Yes, active sleep looks almost like awake sometimes. His eyes even open, flash, look back and forth. His arms shoot up and they shoot down. Sometimes even a cry or a whimper.
Yeah.
And what I come to realize through your training and DVD is that he can stop that on his own. And now we have a wonderful nighttime relationship.
So we can really imagine that many mothers would stop breastfeeding if they believe that this active sleep is a sign that their baby's not sleeping well. So to help new mothers learn this is really important. And of course, when we teach this, we teach that the first 2 weeks of initiation of breastfeeding, wiggling and squirming is a sign of hunger. But once breastfeeding is well established, that's when we start teaching that now you can wait a few minutes and see if that baby who's wiggling and squirming goes back into deep sleep. So as we kind of move along, and again, I'm just talking to about certain of these developmental steps, but one of my favorite one is the 4 month old. We know that important development happens at 4 months, and actually, this is the most common age to start where we'll start seeing nursing strikes. And I believe it's because mothers misinterpret this normal behavior in a 4 month old, and when the baby starts getting distracted, they think, well, and the mother worries the baby's trying to wean, and the mother's like getting anxious herself and sort of stuffing her breast into the baby's mouth. And some babies refuse that and then have a nursing strike. So this is what this behavior looks like in a 4 month old.
A 4 to 5 month old is on the way to exciting motor and mental development. Notice this baby's determination, frustration, and then surprise by rolling over. In just a moment, the baby seems pleased with her accomplishment and is ready to explore the world from this new perspective. Rolling over often happens at the same time a baby becomes increasingly aware of her surroundings. See how she pulls right off the breast when she hears another voice? This distractibility is normal at this age. It is not a sign that the baby wants to wean. Instead, it's evidence of important mental development. Mothers learn that breastfeeding in a less stimulating environment often helps the baby settle down for her meal. Babies who are especially sensitive to developmental surges may be energized by these developmental changes and begin to awaken more at night. If a mother does not anticipate these changes, then she might think her baby is hungry and needs more nighttime calories. However, mothers who understand developmental surges can continue the breastfeeding pattern that was working before the changes began. Now is a good time to practice comforting your baby back to sleep without adding more nighttime feedings. Be sure to watch the Bumps in the Road video on this roadmap page. A 4 to
So, then that we would also want families to be thinking ahead about some of the experiences they may have with a mother returning to work, the 6 month old getting those first teeth, and mothers worried about getting bitten, that 9 month old who has separation anxiety for the first time, which is determined to interrupt her sleep pattern at night, and that 1 year old on the verge of walking. And most all those babies wake up more at night, not because they need more calories, but because they are experiencing the excitement of this development. So though we only have a short amount of time today, I did want to tell you one idea that we love to share in our training, and it is based on this idea: parents don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And this really connects to this idea that parents want to feel like you are talking to specifically to me. You are sharing information that you know will matter to me. And so this program has 3 strategies, and we're only going to talk about one of them briefly, and it is see and share the baby's behavior. And you may be surprised that this concept is borrowed from the world of sports. if you can imagine going to maybe watching the upcoming Olympics on TV, that you will hear two kinds of conversations over the TV. You will hear broadcasting where the people will be saying, the players coming down the court on the left, pivots from her right foot and shoots with her left hand, broadcasting, saying exactly what they see the athlete doing. Commentating, however, would be describing the importance of what you see. So the person on TV might say something like, just last week she sprained that ankle and came limping into practice, and look at her now. She did all her rehab and she's doing awesome. So these two concepts, surprisingly, fit really well with breastfeeding support. So let's look at this mother. Oops, I'm back here, mother. There you are. Um, you might find this mother in your WIC clinic one day and want to say something really encouraging to this mother. So you might say something like, "Oh, you are such a good breastfeeding mother. I can tell that you really enjoy breastfeeding." Well, that would be a nice thing to say. However, what I'm going to suggest is that if we use these techniques, broadcasting, where we say exactly what we see the mother and the baby doing, when we are specific instead of general in what we're saying, it really carries a bigger punch. So, for instance, I might be sitting with this mother in the WIC clinic and say something like, "Oh, I see that as your baby wiggles on the breast, you look down and smile at her. Oh, I noticed that you're using your left hand to support the breast, and your right hand is behind the baby's shoulder blades so that you can pull the baby up close. This is a perfect latch you have the baby in right now." So, what I've done is broadcasted several things that I'm seeing, and then I've commentated. I've told the importance of what have seen. Parents love this. Of all the things we teach, we get the most feedback from professionals like yourself who say, "When I learn to do that, it makes a difference in how parents feel about their encounter with me." So let's talk just briefly about some research that's been done when we look specifically at teaching parents about understanding their baby's behavior. And so a number of published articles have showed the positive impact on the parents of teaching about understanding their baby's behavior. Mothers with babies in a special care nursery felt more confident about leaving the nursery and going home to care for that baby after watching the video I described earlier. Mothers who were attending a childbirth education class had the opportunity to learn about a baby's zones and SOSs, and it increased their confidence to meet their breastfeeding goals. Fathers who had babies in a NICU were in just a 1 hour class in the hospital for the daddies whose babies were in the NICU. And those fathers showed an increased knowledge of infant behavior. This remarkable research was done in a hospital where the mothers were really far away on the other side of the from where the NICU was. And so the fathers actually had more day-to-day time with the babies. And what the nurse who did this research showed was that the fathers who took this class took more pictures of their baby than did the fathers who didn't take the class. I thought that was so interesting because those fathers came to understand that their baby was a real person that was communicating, and that daddy was always snapping some photos to show his wife about how well their baby was doing. Teenage mothers exposed to this information were more likely to attend the breastfeeding classes because they felt like you were kind of talking their language. And then some really amazing research has just come out of Japan from three major universities over there, had a big control and intervention group. And what they showed was that mothers in the group that had access to the roadmap and to the video, that they had lower postpartum depression, lower anxiety, and a lower risk for child abuse using a standardized tool that they use in Japan. So that research has just been sent off for publication, and we can't wait for it to be published. The next set of research, though, talks about the impact of the kind of teaching we're doing today on professionals. What impact does it have on professionals to learn more about reading a baby's body language? And we have three research articles coming out of nursing schools that did a 2-hour program, somewhat similar to what I'm sharing today, and that those nursing students showed an increased knowledge of infant behavior and an increased confidence to teach their parents. The same thing was true at a nursing school in Japan. Doulas who took the course showed an increased confidence in increased knowledge of babies' behavior. Even mothers who had had 3 and 4 and 5 babies said, I learned things I wish I had known when I was a new mother. And then what I thought would be particularly important for you to know is that when we targeted that research to lactation professionals, we really had some exciting results. So an article was published from a New Mexico program, was published in Clinical Lactation a couple of years ago. And what it showed was that out of the 140 breastfeeding peer counselors, dietitian, and IBCLCs who took the 2-hour course, they had increased knowledge about child development and breastfeeding, an increased intention to teach more about child development and its impact on breastfeeding. They had more confidence to teach and that they would recommend the course to others. We just completed a similar research project with statewide in Nevada, and those results quite the same are being published in the Journal of Perinatal Education. So at this point, these are the states who now have statewide training with our program to help families understand, notice a baby's behavior, understand that behavior, and then take action to promote their confidence as parents, their competence as parents, and their breastfeeding success. So the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, Illinois, Nevada, Wisconsin, New Mexico, South Dakota, South Carolina, and we got a slot left over empty here for your state. I'm in the process of reaching out to all of the state WIC programs to see if this information interests them. So let's take a minute and look at some of the resources that are available. Certainly, we have online programs for both patients and professionals. And so the program that seems to be most interesting to most of the WIC programs is the center program, the Roadmap to Breastfeeding Success, where we actually look at that roadmap and begin at the prenatal time and go all the way up to 1 year and talk about a child's development, how we teach families about the changing development and changing experience with breastfeeding. The other 2 courses are helping parents understand their newborn, and then more about the strategies that you saw today. Then I want you to know that another thing that was really kind of a lemonade out of lemons about being stuck home during the pandemic was that we took the roadmap, and what we created was 1 to 2 minute videos at each of these developmental steps. So that, for instance, if you had a mother worrying about her baby crying at 2 weeks, the mother could watch the little 2-minute video about normal crying in a 2-week-old and techniques to calm a fussy baby. And then while she's there, she might think, well, now I wonder what's going to happen at 1 month. I wonder what's going to happen when I return to work. And our idea was that by presenting this all together, but making it in bite-sized pieces that we would motivate families to learn more about their baby's behavior. And so all of these materials now have been put on a page called the Digital Parent Resource page, which is available to the different WIC programs who are interested in this material. So here's a funny little video I put together that talks about a real life situation and how we would hope that these resources would be of help to people like yourself.
It's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and a mother with a 4-month-old calls and says, "I'm so worried. I think my baby wants to wean." She explains that every time the baby goes on the breast, she'll pull off the breast and look all around the room. Do you think that means she wants to wean?
How can you effectively and efficiently reassure this mother that she is describing normal behavior in a 4-month-old and give her tips on what actions to take? Hug Your Baby has created a digital parent resources page available in both English and Spanish. First, you will find Understanding and Caring for Your Newborn, an award-winning 20-minute video that helps parents read their baby's body language in order to prevent and solve problems around their baby's eating, sleeping, crying, and attachment. A handout that recaps this video can be read online or downloaded. The next parent resource is the Roadmap to Breastfeeding Success, a graphic that highlights how a baby's changing development impacts the breastfeeding experience. Notice the handout items in red. Short age-specific videos explain and problem solve around each of these developmental events. The Hug Your Baby digital resources page also helps parents through an e-newsletter series from birth to 1 year. These 12 newsletters offer stories from families like their own, who have come to understand and to manage these bumps in the road. Finally, your clients are able to explore 2 Hugs Around the World lullabies that teach child development concepts while sharing world music traditions. Now let's return to this worried mother, the one who called you at 4 o'clock on Friday. Now you can easily send her a link to the Roadmap to Breastfeeding Success information and point out the video on the normal distractibility of a 4-month-old. You can also show her where to read the 4-month-old newsletter about a mother who faced this same problem.
Oh, your baby's not ready to wean. Both you and your baby love breastfeeding.
You just helped this mother meet her breastfeeding goals, and you did it in just a few minutes. At Hug Your Baby, we hope and expect that the families you serve will benefit from the Digital Parent Resources page, return to it many times in their baby's first year of life, and appreciate the encouragement and information you offer them in their journey to breastfeeding success.
I thought you might like to see the short little 2-minute video that is a part of the birth section because, there's just so much to talk about during the early breastfeeding that we know that families need, and see if you think that this would be helpful.
Congratulations, your baby is here. These next few days are filled with wonder and joy and a bit of normal and healthy worry. Now is the time to take important steps to make sure you meet your breastfeeding goals. On day 1 and 2, mother's first milk, colostrum, contains important bodybuilding proteins and antibodies to fight infection. Since a newborn's stomach is the size of a marble, he eats only about a teaspoon or 5 milliliters at each feeding. Fortunately, colostrum is very concentrated and perfect for your newborn. Most babies experience cluster feeding on day 2. They want to eat more frequently when mother's milk is about to change from colostrum to more mature milk. Putting baby frequently to the breast will both calm the baby and build up mother's milk supply. By day 3, baby's stomach increases from the size of a marble to the size of a table tennis ball. Now baby can eat 1 ounce, which is about 30 milliliters at a time. Feedings will occur about every 3 hours or so. However, like most adults, baby may be hungrier or less hungry at different times of the day. Most babies need to breastfeed 8 to 10 times in 24 hours. A newborn has special ways to communicate that she is hungry. She might bring her hand up to her mouth, smack her lips, or wiggle and squirm like this when she is ready to eat. Early swaddling or pacifier use makes it harder for the baby to communicate those important early signs of hunger. Therefore, most professionals recommend delaying swaddling, pacifier use, and feeding with a bottle until breastfeeding is well established, at about 2 weeks of age. Bringing baby immediately to the breast after birth, practicing lots of skin-to-skin time, and providing only breast milk unless you have a medical problem to address will increase your milk production and help you build a good milk supply. Family, friends, and professionals are here to help you on your breastfeeding journey. But remember, your baby can be your greatest teacher. Watching for early signs of hunger and keeping track of baby's wet diapers and of the number and color of baby's stools will reassure you that your baby is getting plenty to eat. Contact your medical provider or a lactation specialist if you have any breastfeeding concerns when you get home.
Let me just add that I teach a 2-hour virtual breastfeeding class once a month, and it's for free. And I invite any of you to join me for this class, and any of you to refer your patients to this class. You might enjoy it as a way to think about other ways of teaching breastfeeding information, and some of you may like to refer families to join my program because you don't feel like you have those resources in your facility. So all of you who attended this class are going to get a certificate with your CERP credit. I'm going to send the outline of this program for any of you who want to look up the references, a link to reviewing the digital parent resource page, and I will make a recording of this session if any of you want to watch it again. If you have colleagues who are not able to be here, I'm happy for you to share the recording with others. It's just that they won't be able to earn the credit unless they actually came to this class. So, and I will also include in that information about attending my free breastfeeding class. I also teach a 2-hour virtual class, Understanding Your Baby's Behavior. If any of you find that this information really speaks to you, I would be happy to help you understand the training and the resources to be able to have the video and the PowerPoint to be able to teach a class about understanding your baby's behavior. And this really can be taught virtually. And do shoot me an email if I could be in touch with any of your breastfeeding coordinators about about bringing this 1-hour program to your state. So we'll finish up today, and what I'm going to show you is Hugs Around the World Lullaby that makes reference to the World Health Organization 10 Steps to Breastfeeding Success. I'm sure you all know those steps: having a policy, training your staff, only breast milk and less medically indicated, rooming in, lots of skin to skin, breastfeed the first hour, all of those important 10 steps that we know are critically important to a mother's breastfeeding success.
Every baby who's born makes a mother's heart warm. Born in a circle of caring, right from the start. Babies win our heart. In the first hour I get what my mom knows is best. Sleeping by mother's hand, I eat whenever I can. in